Serious? 911 operators of Reddit. What's the scariest call you've ever answered? Scariest because I didn't know what was going on. This was over 3 years ago. A woman called 911. But nothing was being said. Per my policy at the time. If I had an open line with nothing suspicious being heard, I can disconnect and attempt to call back or leave a voicemail after listening for 1 minute. It had been over a minute, but I thought I could hear arguing in the background, or maybe a TV, so I kept listening. Then this older woman came on whispering about her ex finding her and threatening everyone at the house. The house is a ways away from anything, so it took quite a bit to even get there. The whole time she's explaining to me the DV history he has, and how many guns he owns, and which ones are in his vehicles. Anyways, as deputies get to the house, they park at the end of a very long driveway and start to walk up. This female is hiding in a detached shed while the ex is in the house threatening to kill them if they don't tell him where she is. She keeps peeking out but can't see deputies, and then lets out the most blood-curdling scream and says someone is shooting. Cue 45 minutes of me sitting there listening to a cell phone that got dropped on the ground, while deputies barely have radio coverage to communicate. Eventually they get a helicopter overhead and that's all I can hear, as they do PA announcements. Get everyone out of the house handcuffed. Clear the house and do the investigation for what happened. No one got shot or started shooting. She just heard a really loud boom that's unrelated. But the waiting with no updates is what really got me. The ex went to jail on numerous charges. I've only been in this job for a little over a year, so I don't have a ton of experience to draw from yet. The scariest call I've taken was picking up the phone to screaming. Just screaming. Tried to get her address from her a few times. Finally gave up and just went with the cell drop because there was, thankfully, a really tight radius and I needed to get a call on the screen immediately so officers could be dispatched. Because something was truly going on there. I was fortunate she had called in before. So I looked the phone number up and found the address. It fell directly within the cell drop. Turned out she had been stabbed in the head and face by her partner. That's why she was unable to do anything other than scream. He's been charged with attempted murder. A woman called, screaming her head off, that she had driven into a body of water. Her car was filling up with water. She couldn't open the door. She didn't know where she was. etc. Kids in the car. We're all going to die. Meanwhile I'm like, oh, what the duck do I do now? Try to find out details about where she is. We know she can see a massive shopping center, but it could be anywhere even remotely close to that. Local units all fan out to the different large pond streams etc. It could be. Call the Coast Guard and Marine Support units to help. Try to find out what kind of body of water it is, how big it is etc. And she is just too panicked to answer any questions whatsoever. Managed to get the registration of her vehicle and that was it. Turned out she had driven into a flooded road. Absolutely zero danger of the water going past her knees. Had a man call saying there were 3 children locked in a shed behind his building and he was pretty sure they'd been in there all day. It was -12 degrees that day. I asked if he checked to see if they were in there and if they were awake and breathing. He said someone told him, "You don't want to see that," which seemed rational at the time. He turned out to have mental health issues and it wasn't true. But for the tens of thousands of calls I've taken, I was never so scared as in that moment before I knew it was fake. I've posted this before. I'm a former 111 operator from New Zealand. Our emergency call system works differently to 911, where you call 111 and your call is answered by an operator like me who says 111 emergency, fire, ambulance or police. As the caller you must make the decision and the operator connects you to the service you require. If you require more than one service, multiple vehicle RTA, then one service will arrange the other. So police will arrange fire, ambulance. Often there are delays in the day of my scariest call. We had police delays of 15-minute plus. The call went close to this. Me 111 emergency, fire, ambulance or police? Him I'm not sure. I just want someone to know where I am. Me, are you in any danger? I can connect you to police? Him, I just wanted to say goodbye really. Me, connecting you to police. Please stay on the line with me. Him, pause, no. No, it's okay. And then there was an awful noise where the guy has stepped into a geothermal hot pool at a park in Rotorua. The pool was at boiling temperature and he's just hopped on in. Police took some time to answer the call and I had to explain to them what had happened. I won't ever forget the noise. I can't describe it well, but it will be with me for the rest of my life. A few days later I was sick and tired of the job and yelled at a caller for being a complete numpty and was fired. Not even sorry. I was never offered support or counseling for the events I'd heard or been a part of. When I was 4 years old I heard my mom screaming and loud noises and ran next door to my neighbor's house. She called 911 and we were told that when the cops arrived, we should stay inside until they got the all clear. Welp. There was bad communication between the dispatcher and the cops unseen, and my parents believed my neighbor called the cops due to screaming and thought I was abducted. Punchline. The noise was my parents getting busy. I work for the police and answer 911 calls that has been directed to us. My colleges and I have taken calls from hers who call in themselves explaining that they just held their friend's neighbor so etc. Those calls are chilling to listen to. Also calls from an ongoing terror attack. And of course when someone is calling in and there's complete chaos in the background due to someone being attacked or someone breaking in. Suicides can be hard too. Hearing the complete despair in their voices as you are trying to find out where they are so that you can direct a police patrol to them. People trying to take their own lives aren't always so keen on being found. I've also had calls where I needed to ask only yes or no questions. Those happens mostly when the perpetrator is nearby and doesn't know that the caller is talking to the police. Those calls aren't so scary but more challenging. After Hurricane Katrina, the local news program in South Mississippi put together a DVD of videos before, during, and after. Honestly, the whole thing just made me cry. What really stood out for me was one of the 911 recordings they included. You could clearly hear a man telling the dispatcher, "I know you can't come to help, but I needed to let you know that me and mama are going to die." Was before my time at my center, but this story sticks with me. We're fairly close to Nick. One of the trainees was sitting at a police desk. We're a police fire Ems County dispatch center, so we split the roles. The morning of 9/11. At the time, the FDNY were using radio bands that traveled great distance and tended to interfere with our radios in such a way that we could clearly hear their ground comms. That morning, immediately after the first plane hit, my center started being inundated with calls looking for help finding loved ones. Suspicious activity involving non-white people. And generally just being slammed. AO, the trainee, being unequipped to answer the calls fast enough, was placed on a different desk to just listen to radios. It just so happened that that day the FDNY radios were interfering with ours, so he spent 4 hours listening to crews going into buildings. Those same crews not answering a PA, and the subsequent maelstrom of situation that followed. He killed himself about 12 years later. And it was strongly suggested to me that it was due largely in part to those 4 hours. Goddamn. Why are we only seeing policemen and firefighters as heroes? Looking at these stories, 911 operators should also be on that list. 911 call takers and dispatchers are the first responder. Mostly heard and never seen. And most never get closure. And are still only considered secretaries. What secretary do you know that routinely deals with people probably having the worst day of their lives? Dispatchers and call takers, angels of the airwaves. Woman on the line. Screaming incoherently. I can tell she's trying to say what's happening. But I can't make out a damn thing. Took forever. But managed to get out of her that her husband and son had heard the window of their truck smash outside. They went charging out there together to catch the guy. But the guy was well prepared. Husband got stabbed. Son got pepper sprayed. My caller was completely losing her mind. Ended up catching the guy because of the sheer volume of neighbors that ended up coming running out of their houses. Someone pinned him until we got there. I have a lot of trouble remembering all the shitty calls I deal with. But this one sticks out because it's a unique feeling of powerlessness to have someone just screaming on the phone. Terrified. And not be able to make out what's going on. Anyways. LPT. Property can be replaced. Call the police and let the pros deal with criminals. Your chances of getting stabbed will be significantly reduced. My colleague took a call from a parent who had just reversed over their 3-year-old with a forklift bobcat. I think we all cried that day. 11-year veteran. The only calls that get me are the ones involving kids. The baby's not breathing. The young child who discovers her mother hanging. Took a call once for a toddler who touched a live wire knocked down in a storm. Only ashes and shoes left. Not the same. But made a call to her operator. This was back when I was 15. At the time I was living in a very wealthy town. I drove my moped through a underpass into some train tracks and saw clearly parts of a human body or whatever remained of a person. Stopped to make the call. There was a 40-year-old woman answering and she was horrified about how calm I was about the situation. Police came. I gave a statement. Was forced into counseling at school. Told after 2 weeks that nothing wrong with me. As I had told them multiple times. Later on learned the same month that the person who I saw the remains of was a former hockey teammate. I'd seen a few months back. Could not recognize his corpse. Since he looked like he'd been through a cheese grater. Visited his family once and greeted them multiple times after what happened. I never got to know if it was an accident or self-inflicted. Okay, I'm super late to this, but I've got a rather harrowing one. Also, it wasn't actually myself on the call, but another civilian operator in the room with me. The call came from a 7-year-old boy who took his time incredibly shakily explaining that his mother had been tied up with tape in the living room of their house whilst a burglar worked his way through their possessions upstairs. The burglar didn't take the time to detain the young boy, and the mother had tape over her mouth, so the kid managed to bring himself to call 999 and get help. The kid's a hero. The operator unfortunately was hugely affected. It's a very emotionally draining job sometimes. She really struggled to keep it together when she realized how serious this all was and how scared the kid was. But the two of them did an excellent job in resolving it all. Call was around 15 minutes. She obviously stayed connected until police arrived. The average burglary takes only 12 minutes in and out in the UK. So the burglar didn't get caught at the time, but police arrived quickly enough to help the mother and her son. I have no idea if he was caught later on because we rarely get follow-ups on anything. But I hope the pose was. Scariest? Not really scary, but most entertaining for me was going to a small town for a paranoid drunk supposedly ex-military who got into his fight with his buddy, but he didn't want to go because he didn't trust the government, vaccines, or healthcare. He had bandaged the hand up already. Then the cops went to go pick the guy up, so the patient's buddy relative went inside and came out with a rifle which he took to a house down the street. Kind of tense situation there. You have real scary. Wasn't real scary. And scary if you're an idiot. Real scary was a girl calling 911. She was on the side of the road by a casino, making out with some guy. A random guy in all black taps the glass with the butt of a gun. He tells the male driver to hand over all his shit. She immediately dials 911 and discreetly holds the phone so guy with gun can't see it. Before I even finish asking where the caller is, all I hear is a gunshot. Turned out guy with the gun wasn't all that patient. Shot the driver in the head. Wasn't real scary was a young teenage female being home alone. Dog started barking and she heard a door open and slam shut. She's hiding in her room under her bed with the door shut. Gives all the relevant info and I'm on the phone with her. Said she could hear doors opening and creaking. Turned out it was a windy day. She was home alone with the dogs the entire time. Scary if you're an idiot duck. I can't narrow it down to one or two. There are too many idiots in this world and I don't have all day to tell their stories. TL. Answer the phone to hear a gunshot and a woman starts screaming. Girl thinks she's a victim of a home invasion. It was the wind. Too many people in the world that are dumber than a bag of wet grass. Bonus, I got written up for home invasion girl. I asked if she was on the first floor and if she could get out through it if they got into her room. That made me and the city liable if she ran into the street and got plowed by a car, allowing her family to sue me in said city. I was supposed to be vague and ask if there are windows and if they are painted shut etc. I'm not an EMS provider or an operator, but my mom is a paramedic. Has been for about 20 years. She's never told me the full story, but the worst I've heard from her is she told me the TLDR of how she and the crew had to sit there and watch this girl burn alive in her car because they couldn't get her out no matter what they tried and the seatbelt had melted. It'll always stick with me. And how she said that she'll never forget the screams and how horrifying it was. Speaking of which, ran into a person who said that paramedics etc. don't have to deal with bad shit. This is proof that all emergency service providers do, and they do deal with PTSD.